How's it going, YouTube? Kovacic today with another video, and today guys, what to bring to you is the emergency meta update. Now this is also going to be a lot about the Banlist fallout because there's actually nationals this weekend, and that gives everyone 3 days to prepare, which is pretty insane. And then Hartford is 10 days away, so there's definitely a lot to consider here, and there's a lot that we have to focus on for the new meta, because I feel like half the battle is getting your mindset away from the meta that you were just in and just completely like no blinders going into the new meta and realizing a lot of the trends that we're about to be seeing, because even the Handtrap lineup is vastly different, right? And we'll talk about that later on in the video. I feel like there's a lot of sleeper decks that a lot of people are just not going to be prepared for. I also think that the best decks right now, we definitely have to talk about them too, because even those changed up a little bit from where they were before, even a couple days ago in my last meta update, right? So if you have not already been to the Imperium Duelist store, definitely go over there and check it out. If you go into the link in the description below, you'll find that, and then also use code GGYGO10. Let's hop right on into talking about what happened in this meta, because I feel like it shifted pretty hard. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about is going to be the best decks after the list. I think that this is an important topic to bring up here, because you really want to know, like, what are the best 2 or 3 decks in the room to beat. Because I personally thought that Prank Kids were going to win Hartford, but now that it's basically a dead deck, I don't really see that happening, of course, you know. So we have to focus on something different now. So I think that Despia is going to be one of the most represented decks in the room, of course. I think that it has the most power, the most potential. I personally think that Sword Soul will end up winning Hartford. I think that it has a really good potential, because especially with the additional desires and going back to the more pure build, I just think that its OTK lines and the amount of people who've been piloting the deck for super long now, I think that it's really going to show off this weekend, because it didn't get any hits at all. Like, it got hit on like the Halcdon combo, but like it doesn't need that to do its full combo. It also never needed that in the first place, right? So I really do like the fact that you can play the additional desires now in the deck as well, and I feel like it just gives it a lot of power. The other thing too is that one of the best decks that I brought up last time was Cyber's Eldritch. I think that the new, better version of that is going to be the Floodgate variant, because the DP hit was just too much for the Cyber's Eldritch deck, in my opinion. So the best decks in the room, definitely Despia number 1, Sword Soul number 2, and then the Eldritch deck number 3. We're going to be talking about some tech cards here in a little bit, about why I think that these decks have really solid matchups against the others. Just because I had a lot of people asking me in my poll today about the Despia and the Sword Soul matchup directly, and like how one interacts with the other. So we'll talk about that a little bit down the line here. But I want to talk a little bit more about my sleeper decks going into this weekend, because I think that they're really important to mention here. That's going to be starting off with the Punk Therian deck, Trickstar, Therian ABC, and then Pendulum. Now, all of these decks may seem like they might not do a whole lot going into this weekend in terms of like versing off against the Sword Soul deck or Despia, but fun fact, a lot of these actually do show a lot of promise going into the weekend. And I know that we just got Light Stage to 2, but I think that there's going to be really solid Trickstar Dogmatica builds that show up, or if you want to play like branded Trickstar, and then you can put like Masquerade on board with the Trickstar cards that are already burning and just do like a burn build. And I don't think that's too far off from something that we could see. Branded Trickstar Dogmatica. Like, I could definitely see that being a variant that we see going into this weekend. The Punk Therian deck, I think, is really strong. Off of 1 E-Telly, as long as you have a discard, you mill 9 cards, and you can full combo. A lot of times they're playing, like, Punk Brave Therian even, and they put up double Omni Negate before they even combo. So I think that's even more important, too. Just the viability of a new combo deck in the game, especially when a lot of people aren't on Nibiru, at least in the main deck. And that's really important for a deck like this to really just be able to go off, because of those cards not really being in the current meta. Looking at even like ABC, I think this deck is really cool because it turns your cards like Regulus into extenders. Because if you do Regulus attach like B from the graveyard, you can then summon the B off of the Regulus in combo, which is another thing that I think is really strong and a lot of people just won't be ready for. And last but not least, having the 1-card Pendulum scales through Monkey Board, having Beyond the Pendulum, and all of the cool tech cards you can run even in Pendulum, like Baguska. Baguska is just something that absolutely dominates in the Despia matchup, which is pretty crazy. I think that that's really worth to note too, that Pendulum, not only can they put up, you know, just kind of like a mid board for turn 1 and then kill turn 3, but like they also just have a lot of versatility, I think, in the deck itself, because you can play a lot of extenders, or you can play like heavier on your combo pieces as well. I just like the deck a lot, especially if you're playing against like the Eldritch deck, and you can play things like Dragon Pit to try to get rid of like skill drains and what have you. Still very, very strong as an option in the game currently. I also just like that you can go Baguska, and then you can go like attack with Baguska and then make Zeus over top of that too. You know, I just think that that's really strong. But moving off of the sleeper decks at the current moment, a lot of people were asking me, you know, like, where's Striker at now? Like, Meow Mew got banned, the Anaconda got banned, we got Change of Heart. Are we still playing the Enchantress package because we don't have Anaconda? So I want to be able to answer all this for you, because this was a very big question. Now, one, I think that Striker, now more than ever, has an amazing time in the meta, because Despia, yes, it's a tougher matchup because it is a big grind and it can get pretty hard. But at the same time, you don't have to worry about Prank Kid anymore. Like, this is a deck that's just not going to make it a problem at an event. It's not something that you have to just prepare for. And so I think that's a huge relief, at least from a Striker standpoint, is that like, wow, okay, we don't have to worry about this card. Like, it's not going to be a problem. The other thing though, Anaconda is banned. So does that mean that we still play the right package, the Enchantress? I still think that this is fine for a couple reasons. I think that it's better if you're going second, but it's also not that bad if you're going first. Because if you're playing like the Illegal Knight or the Griffin, either you summon Griffin and you have a negate, or you summon a token and then you hold the Illegal Knight in your hand for your opponent's turn. And then when they commit to their board, you summon it from your hand, and then you can interact with them there, which I think is really cool as well. Also with the Illegal Knight, if they imperm your Illegal Knight, you can then make Dark anyway, and then you can keep comboing. The other thing that I like a lot more for the Enchantress package, if you're going second instead, is A, you have the Draco back bounce, B, you have the Illegal Knight, and then C, if you have like Rose or Ray at that point too, you have like the most free Zeke in the world. So that's also super clean, because like at that point you can just go and threaten out a card with Draco back. You can threaten out a card with Illegal Knight. You can summon Ray and then go into Zeke and threaten out another card. So like you just have so much opportunity to play the game, whereas you're also getting your spell count. So yes, I think that it's still viable to run this. You just got to make sure that you're playing something in your extra deck that gives you ways to clear them off of your board when you need to. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, that you can't just make like a Verte anymore, right? But there are other cards right now that you'll see in my list when I post it, probably tomorrow, that I'll talk about that really do help mitigate that situation. And last but not least, we also have Change of Heart now. So that just means that our going second game board is just going to be going for one of our 5 Widow Anchors now, which is crazy. We have 3 Anchor, 1 Mind Control, and 1 Change of Heart. So we are taking monsters still, you know, it's really solid. I just think that right now, the most comfortable Striker list to me has to be just going second. There's a lot of viability in going first with like the Therian cards. I'm honestly not too impressed by the Therian cards after testing. I think that they're fine, but like if you don't see an ace and you see Therian cards, you can't play the game, which obviously is still just like a problem. But that's something that I've noticed a lot too, is where like it's just really hard when you open up like Therian Field Spell and like no ace, because at that point you can't put a Machine Engrave. So it does get kind of hard, but you got to take it with what it is. If you run them both together, that's something that will happen eventually. But they're still pretty strong to have in the deck with the Striker engine as well, especially because it takes some additional time to be able to swing over the Shizuku as well, which I like a lot. These are the tech cards that I want to talk about. Fluondaries is now playing Harpy Harpist for 2 reasons. One, when this card is summoned, you can then target another wing beast you control and a monster your opponent controls and can pulse them, which is pretty cool. The other thing is that when you play Harpist, you're allowed to activate Storm from your hand. So equally pretty insane. The ability to just like not have to set it. I like that a lot. I think that's just very strong. The other card I want to mention here is, so like Despia, depending on what build you're playing, or if you open up like Opening, a lot of times you're not really too concerned with your normal summon in Despia. One of the tech cards that I've been theorizing for a little while now is actually just siding Denko. Because if you're really afraid of like the Trap Eldritch variant, and like any other rogue deck that might show up, because that's what happens after a ban list, right? If you don't know what to play, some people just go back to playing like Control. You have Denko available to you, and it's also a light target that you can send in your deck. So like I think that's equally fine. I think Denko's really nice in the Despia deck. Now, the other thing that gives Sword Soul quite the edge right now is anti-magic arrows. At the start of the battle phase, for the rest of the turn after the card resolves, spell trap cards and their effects cannot be activated, and the effects cannot be activated in response to this card. So, like, you can go battle phase, start a battle phase, activate anti-magic arrows, and then your opponent can just not respond to you, which I think is really nice because at that point it just shuts it all off, and you can go like Boxia and start spinning out back row as well. So be careful if you're playing at Sword Soul and they go battle phase. If you have like a skill drain or something, you might want to preemptively flip it just to make sure that you don't get auto lost by this. Because like if you think that's an evenly and you're like, all right, I have the negate for it, but then they go anti-magic arrows, like, you know, you're just kind of losing that game. But I think that this is really cool though. I think that it gives Sword Soul quite the edge because they can run this card the best right now. But these cards have definitely started seeing play, at least not Denko yet, but I think that it can see a lot, but the Harpist and the arrows really have been lately. So let's talk about hand traps, because I feel like this is going to be really important. So the one thing that I've noticed is that in this meta alone, main decking 3 Crow really isn't that bad. This is something where we've all talked about Crow for a little bit now and how it's pretty impactful in the game as it is. But I think that right now more than ever, with the amount of the Despia decks you're playing against, and even against Sword Soul, because here's the thing, a lot of people are wanting me to make a new hand trap guide, and I have one in the works right now, but it's just going to take me a couple days to really get that together because I always want to make sure those are pristine. But if you want a quick tip on how to beat Sword Soul, the new combo now, when they go like Monk, Berserker, Chi-Shao, and the Sinister, whenever they go Boxia off their Tai A and they dump Mo Yi, and then they use Boxia effect to target Mo Yi, Crow Mo Yi, and then a lot of times you should be fine. Of course, unless they have like a Monk on the board already and like an Anhara engrave. So you kind of have to decide like what the board state is at that point. But if you have like a well-timed Crow at that point to get rid of the Mo Yi, it's going to be one of the best plays that you can do to stop the deck from really being able to combo that much further. So the other thing too is that I think that a lot of people just don't really respect Rock. And if we're already going to see things like Pendulum playing a lot now, we're going to see a lot of Sword Soul. Sometimes I feel like now more than ever, Nibiru might just be correct to have back in the main deck. It really just depends on how good your Despia matchup is and if you're okay having dead cards in your deck against Despia. Because they'll never play into a Nibiru for the most part. But at the same time, you're going to see such an array of decks this weekend just from the amount of different decks that just feel like they can play now. I feel like the Prank It deck moving away is going to just really enable a lot of decks to be able to come back to the game. And especially like Pot of Desires even, there's just a lot of other decks, especially with like Pendulum too, that I feel like Nibiru now more than ever is going to be more worth. Same with Droll. I think that Droll has a lot more viability. It's really solid against like the Despia lore build too. So like kind of take that with a grain of salt, but like definitely go ahead and start testing this at least before the weekend and making sure that like maybe it isn't correct, but if it is, make sure that you have it in your deck, you know? I think that Droll is still very good as an option right now, especially with all the rogue running around. It's not that good against Sword Soul, but it is pretty okay against Despia. That's one thing that I think is definitely fine. Again, it's not very good against like the Eldritch deck either, so it's definitely still just gonna be like a side card, but maybe you consider having this in your sideboard this weekend. So something else I want to talk about though that I thought was kind of funny was a lot of people were asking about like why Wall of Revealing Light was off the list. I think that this is something that is potentially like Dino Ruffio support. So you can activate this card by paying multiples of 1,000. Monsters your opponent controls cannot attack if their attack is less than or equal to the amount that you paid. So if you pay like 7,000 and then you have Rextrum, this is where like it becomes that monster on the board where your opponent cannot activate effects. So I think that's kind of cool because they can't attack and they can't activate effects. And this is at I want to say 1 now, so you can't like trap trick it, but like it's still like a pretty solid card. I think that it's still going to be something that we can at least think about moving forward. If it's at 2 right now, I don't remember. If it's at 2, then you can trap trick it, and that's pretty cool. But this is something that I think that moving forward would have some implication into the Dino Ruffia deck. But I hope that this video did help you at least get in the mindset of the new meta, because there is quite a bit of changes that just happened, right? So we want to make sure that we're on top of those. If you've not already joined my Discord, definitely go ahead and do that. Go into my Twitch, my Twitter. And if you have not already subbed yet, definitely consider subscribing too. We're almost at 12,000 subs. And I also have my Metafy. If you're looking to get a Metafy session, especially before one of these bigger tournaments, definitely go ahead in the description below. Check out my Metafy, get a session, and then I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you all so much.